Sarah Chen had always been different from her classmates at the Galactic Academy. While the other students came from advanced alien civilizations with centuries of space travel behind them, she was just a human from Earth, a planet most beings considered primitive and backwards. The Academy had accepted her as part of their new diversity program, though many questioned whether humans belonged among the galaxy's elite. The morning started like any other day in advanced combat strategy class. Professor Vexthal, a tall reptilian being with golden scales, stood before the holographic display showing various battle formations. His multiple eyes swept across the classroom, taking in the diverse group of students from 12 different species. Today we will examine the Battle of Kepler Station, Professor Vexthal announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed actual warfare. This engagement demonstrates the importance of superior technology and numerical advantage in modern combat. Sarah sat in the back row, taking notes on her primitive tablet while her classmates used advanced neural interfaces. The Zephyrian students could process information directly into their enhanced brains, while the crystalline Xerons communicated through harmonic frequencies. Even the insectoid Kythera had evolved specialized organs for tactical analysis. "Miss Chen," Professor Vexthal called suddenly, causing Sarah to look up. "Perhaps you could enlighten us with the human perspective on this battle?" Several students turned to stare at Sarah, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. She recognized the look, it was the same one she received when she struggled with the Academy's advanced technology or when her primitive human reflexes couldn't keep up with enhanced alien physiology. The attacking force had 3-to-1 numerical superiority and advanced plasma weapons, Sarah replied carefully. Standard tactical doctrine would suggest overwhelming firepower concentrated on weak points. Correct, though simplistic, Professor Vexthal acknowledged. The Galactic Defense Force employed standard formation tactics and achieved victory within 4 hours. Efficient, predictable, successful. That word, predictable, stuck in Sarah's mind. Throughout her time at the Academy, she had noticed how alien military thinking followed rigid patterns. Every species had evolved their combat strategies over millennia, creating sophisticated but, ultimately formulaic approaches to warfare. The Zephyrians always used energy shields and precision strikes. The Xerons favored coordinated mass attacks. The Kythera relied on swarm tactics and hive mind coordination. But humans? Humans were chaotic, unpredictable, and often desperate enough to try anything. The lecture continued with detailed analysis of weapon effectiveness ratios and shield penetration calculations. Sarah found herself drifting, thinking about the historical battles she had studied on Earth. Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off hundreds of thousands. Kenny, where Hannibal crushed a larger Roman force through pure tactical genius. Stalingrad, where defenders turned urban warfare into a nightmare for invaders. None of those victories had come through superior technology or predictable tactics. A soft chime indicated the class period was ending. Students began gathering their materials, some simply thought their belongings into dimensional storage, while others like Sarah had to physically pack their items. She was nearly finished when the Academy's emergency alarm began blaring. The sound was unlike anything Sarah had heard before, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull. Red warning lights bathed the classroom in an ominous glow as Professor Vexthal's expression shifted from mild academic interest to genuine alarm. "All students remain calm," he announced, though his own voice carried an edge of concern. "This is likely a drill or minor technical issue." The Academy's communication system crackled to life with Director Quandaz's voice. The elderly ethereal's normally serene tone carried unmistakable urgency. "This is not a drill. Unknown hostile forces have breached Academy space. All students and faculty report to designated safe zones immediately. Security protocols are now in effect." Sarah felt her heart rate spike as the reality hit her. The Galactic Academy orbited a neutron star in the Veil Nebula, one of the most secure locations in known space. For hostiles to reach this position meant they had somehow bypassed or destroyed multiple layers of defense. Students began moving toward the exits, but their movements were orderly, almost mechanical. The Zephyrians formed perfect lines according to their social hierarchy. The Xerons moved in geometric patterns that optimized space usage. Even in crisis, each species followed their ingrained behavioral patterns. Sarah, stay close to your study group, Professor Vexthal instructed. Follow standard evacuation procedures. But, as they entered the corridor, Sarah could see the evacuation wasn't going smoothly. The Academy's passages were designed for normal daily movement, not emergency situations involving hundreds of panicked beings. Bottlenecks formed as different species moved at different speeds and, in different patterns. The Kythera, with their insect-like physiology, could scramble along walls and ceilings but kept colliding with flying species like the avians. The massive Taurian students, each weighing over half a ton, couldn't move quickly through standard doorways. Crystalline Xerons communicated through sound frequencies that interfered with the Academy's communication systems. Sarah found herself swept along in a river of confused alien students, none of whom seemed to know exactly what was happening. The Academy's security training had focused on individual species protocols, not mixed-group emergencies. Then, the lights went out. Emergency illumination kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie blue glow. But, in that brief moment of darkness, Sarah heard something that chilled her blood, the distinct hum of military transporters. "They're already inside," she whispered to herself. The sound came again, closer this time. Sarah recognized it from Earth military documentaries, the characteristic whine of matter displacement technology used for rapid deployment of troops. But, this was different, more advanced. Whatever forces were attacking the Academy had technology that could bypass standard defenses entirely. Professor Vexthal was speaking rapidly into his communication device, trying to coordinate with Academy security. But, Sarah could see the confusion in his multiple eyes. Like all the alien faculty, he was following established procedures designed for conventional threats. None of them had prepared for an enemy that could simply materialize inside supposedly secure areas. A Zephyrian student near the front of the group suddenly screamed, a high-pitched sound that cut through the noise like a blade. Through the crowd, Sarah caught a glimpse of what had frightened him. Figures in dark armor were moving through the corridors ahead, carrying weapons that sparked with unknown energy. They moved with mechanical precision, cutting off escape routes and herding students like cattle. But, their armor wasn't like anything in the Academy's databases, smooth, organic-looking surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Unknown hostiles confirmed, Professor Vexthal reported into his communicator, requesting immediate security response. But, the reply that came back was crackling with static and desperation. Security teams compromised. Primary defenses offline. Unknown technology jamming communications. All units fall back to secondary positions. Sarah's mind raced as she processed what she was hearing. The attackers hadn't just penetrated Academy defenses, they had systematically dismantled them. This wasn't a random attack or piracy attempt. This was a carefully planned operation targeting the galaxy's most prestigious educational institution. But, why? The Academy housed students from dozens of species, representing the next generation of galactic leadership. Taking them hostage would create an unprecedented crisis. Unless. "They're not here for ransom," Sarah said aloud, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Professor Vexthal looked at her sharply. "What did you say, Miss Chen?" "This isn't about money or political demands," Sarah explained, her voice growing stronger as the pieces fell into place. "They're here to eliminate us. Every student in this academy represents the future leadership of their species. If they kill us all." She didn't need to finish the thought. The implications were clear to everyone who heard her. This was an attempt at decapitation strike against galactic civilization itself. The professor's scale shifted to a deep crimson, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "That's impossible. No one would dare attack the Academy. The retaliation would be swift and absolute. Unless they plan to make it look like an accident," Sarah countered. "Or unless they're confident enough in their technology that retaliation doesn't matter." As if summoned by her words, the dark-armored figures rounded the corner ahead of them. Up close, Sarah could see they weren't entirely mechanical, there was something organic about their movements, something that suggested living beings inside the armor rather than pure artificial intelligence. "Students, move back slowly," Professor Vexthal instructed, his training finally kicking in. "Do not make sudden movements or attempt to communicate with hostiles." But the figures didn't seem interested in communication. They raised their weapons, sleek devices that hummed with barely contained energy, and began advancing down the corridor. Their movements were perfectly coordinated, each one covering specific angles and approaches. Sarah watched their formation and felt something click in her mind. She had seen similar patterns before, in old Earth military manuals her grandfather had shown her. He had been a career soldier, and she had grown up listening to his stories about asymmetric warfare and unconventional tactics. "They're using standard suppression formation," she murmured, studying their approach. "Overlapping fields of fire, controlled advance, corner clearing protocol." "Miss Chen, this is not the time for tactical analysis," Professor Vexthal hissed. But Sarah wasn't listening anymore. Her human brain, shaped by millions of years of persistence hunting and tribal warfare, was processing the situation differently than her alien classmates. Where they saw an overwhelming technological advantage, she saw patterns and possibilities. The attackers expected fear, panic, and disorganized retreat. They expected their targets to follow predictable behavioral patterns based on established protocols. They expected resistance to be mounted by security forces using conventional weapons and tactics. They weren't expecting a human girl who had grown up reading about guerrilla warfare and thinking outside established paradigms. "Professor," Sarah said quietly, "I need you to trust me. When I give the signal, tell everyone to scatter into the maintenance passages." "Absolutely not," he replied immediately. "Academy protocol clearly states that students must remain with faculty during emergencies." "Academy protocol was written by people who never fought a war on Earth," Sarah shot back. "Trust me or watch everyone die." The dark figures were only 30 meters away now, their weapons beginning to emit a higher-pitched whine that suggested imminent firing. Sarah could see other students frozen in terror, their natural responses paralyzed by the alien nature of the threat. But humans had been the prey species for most of their evolutionary history. When faced with overwhelming predators, they had learned to run, hide, and fight dirty. "Now," Sarah whispered. Professor Vexthal hesitated for just a moment, then made a decision that would change everything. "All students, emergency dispersal pattern 7, he announced. "Maintenance access points, move." The effect was immediate chaos. Students scattered in every direction, following emergency protocols they had drilled but never expected to use. The Kythera scuttled up walls toward ceiling vents. Flying species took off in different directions. Even the massive Taurians began squeezing through passages that seemed too small for their bulk. The attackers' formation faltered for just a moment, their coordinated advance disrupted by targets moving in unpredictable patterns. It was only a second or two of confusion, but Sarah had been counting on exactly that. She broke away from the main group and sprinted toward a maintenance panel she had noticed during her daily walks around the academy. Her human hands, clumsy with most alien technology, had memorized the simple mechanical latches used for emergency systems. The panel popped open just as the first energy bolt seared through the air where the students had been standing moments before. Sarah dove through the opening into the narrow maintenance corridor beyond, her heart pounding as she realized her desperate gamble had actually worked. But this was just the beginning. The attackers would regroup quickly, and scattered students hiding in maintenance tunnels wouldn't survive long against professional soldiers with advanced technology. Sarah crawled through the narrow space, her mind already working on the next problem. She needed information about the attackers, their numbers, their objectives, their weaknesses. She needed to find a way to contact the outside galaxy for help. Most importantly, she needed to find a way to turn the academy itself into a weapon. Humans had always been good at making weapons out of whatever was available. Behind her, she could hear the attackers reorganizing, their mechanical voices coordinating search patterns through the academy's corridors. They sounded confident, professional, unstoppable. They had never fought humans before. Sarah smiled grimly in the darkness of the maintenance tunnel, her grandfather's words echoing in her memory, "When you can't fight fair, don't fight fair at all." The battle for the Galactic Academy was just beginning, and Sarah Chen was about to teach the galaxy's most advanced military minds what human ingenuity really meant. Sarah crawled through the maintenance tunnel for what felt like hours, though her watch showed only 20 minutes had passed since the attack began. The tunnel was designed for automated repair drones, not human-sized beings, and her shoulders ached from the constant scraping against metal walls. The Academy's maintenance system was a marvel of engineering, thousands of kilometers of tunnels, conduits, and access ways that kept the massive station running. Most students never even thought about the infrastructure that provided their gravity, atmosphere, and power. But Sarah had always been curious about how things worked, a trait that had earned her mockery from classmates who considered manual labor beneath civilized beings. Now that curiosity might keep them all alive. She paused at an intersection where 3 tunnels met, pressing her ear against the wall to listen for movement in the corridors beyond. The vibrations through the metal told her the attackers were conducting systematic sweeps, moving through the academy section by section. Their footsteps had a mechanical rhythm that suggested either enhanced soldiers or some kind of powered armor. A soft scratching sound ahead made her freeze. Something else was in the tunnels. "Sarah? Is that you?" The voice was barely a whisper, but she recognized it immediately. "Zix," she called softly. A moment later, her study partner emerged from a side tunnel. Zixthera was a young Kithera whose insectoid physiology made him naturally suited for crawling through tight spaces. His forearms and articulated legs allowed him to move through the maintenance system much more efficiently than Sarah's awkward human form. "I followed your path from the corridor," he explained, his mandibles clicking nervously. "The Dark Ones are hunting us. They have some kind of scanning technology that can track most species, but..." He paused, studying Sarah with his compound eyes. "They seem to have difficulty detecting humans." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "I watched them search the section where you escaped. Their scanners found 3 Zephyrian students hiding in storage compartments, but they passed right by an access panel where I could clearly smell your scent trail." That was interesting and, potentially useful information. Sarah filed it away as she considered their next move. "Have you seen any other students?" "A few. The avian students are hiding in the upper levels where their flight advantage helps. Some Xerons have barricaded themselves in the crystal and resonance chambers where their harmonic abilities work better. But most are just hiding and hoping security will rescue them." "Security isn't coming," Sarah said bluntly. "I heard the communications before we scattered. The attackers took out the primary defenses before making their move. This was planned too well for any conventional response to work." Zix's exoskeleton shifted color to a deep blue, a sign of distress in his species. "Then, we are doomed. These creatures have technology far beyond anything in our databases. Their armor absorbs energy weapons fire, and their scanning systems can track individuals through multiple barriers." "Maybe," Sarah said, her mind working through possibilities. "But every technology has weaknesses. We just need to find them." She began moving again, leading the way toward what she hoped was the Academy's central hub. The maintenance tunnels formed a secondary network that paralleled the main corridors, allowing access to critical systems throughout the station. If she could reach the engineering sections, there might be ways to level the playing field. "Where are we going?" Zix asked, his multiple legs making soft clicking sounds as he followed. "To find out who these attackers really are," Sarah replied. "And to turn their own advantages against them." They emerged from the tunnel system into a service bay near the Academy's central core. The area was normally bustling with maintenance drones and automated systems, but now it stood eerily quiet. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows across walls lined with access panels and monitoring displays. Sarah approached one of the main terminals and began working through the interface. The Academy systems were designed for multiple species, so most functions could be accessed through simple visual commands rather than species-specific neural links. "What are you doing?" Zix whispered, keeping watch at the entrance. "Getting information." Sarah's fingers moved quickly across the control surface. "If these attackers are using advanced scanning technology, they must be interfacing with our systems somehow. Every scan leaves a signature. The display flickered as Sarah navigated through layers of system data. She had always been good with computers. Humans might not have neural interfaces, but they had developed sophisticated manual interaction systems over centuries of technological development. There, she said, highlighting a series of data streams. Unknown access protocols in the sensor network. Whatever they're using to scan for us, it's tapping directly into Academy systems. Zix moved closer, his compound eye studying the display. Those access patterns, they're not random. There's a structure to them, like they're following some kind of search algorithm. Sarah nodded. They're being methodical. Searching room by room, tracking life signs, cataloging what they find. But, look at this. She pointed to several gaps in the data. These are areas where their scans came back incomplete or empty, even though we know students are hiding there. The resonance chambers where the Xerons are hiding, Zix recognized. And the upper flight corridors where the avians went. Exactly. Their scanning technology works by interfacing with our systems, but it can't account for environmental factors that block or distort sensors. Sarah's mind was racing now, connecting pieces of information. And it definitely has problems with humans. Whatever signature it's looking for, human physiology doesn't match the pattern. She began pulling up schematics of the Academy structure, focusing on areas where environmental conditions might interfere with advanced scanning systems. The station's design incorporated dozens of different atmospheric zones, gravity variants, and electromagnetic environments to accommodate various species' needs. The quantum resonance labs, Sarah said suddenly. The scanning beams would be completely disrupted by the quantum field generators. And the gravity training chambers, the variable field effects would scatter any sensor readings. But those areas are locked down during emergencies, Zix pointed out. Only faculty codes can access them. Sarah smiled grimly. Then, it's a good thing humans are notorious for ignoring rules. She began working through the Academy's security protocols, using techniques her grandfather had taught her about finding weaknesses in seemingly secure systems. Every network had backdoors and emergency overrides, especially systems designed to accommodate multiple species with different technological approaches. Got it, she announced as a series of access codes appeared on the screen. Maintenance override protocols. They're designed to give repair crews access during emergencies, but they'll work for us too. Sarah, Zix said urgently, his antennae twitching. I'm detecting movement in the corridors. They've found this section. Sarah quickly copied the access codes to her tablet and began shutting down the terminal. How long do we have? Maybe 2 minutes before they reach this bay. They dove back into the maintenance tunnels just as Sarah heard the distinctive hum of scanner beams sweeping through the service area. The attackers were thorough, she could hear them checking every storage compartment and access point. But they didn't think to scan inside the maintenance system itself. Whatever weaknesses their technology had regarding humans seemed to extend to areas where humans had been present. We need to contact the other students, Sarah whispered as they crawled through the narrow passages. If we can get them to the shielded areas, we can regroup and plan some kind of resistance. How? The communication systems are jammed, and moving through the corridors is suicide. Sarah had been thinking about that problem. The maintenance network isn't just tunnels. It includes power conduits, data lines, and atmospheric systems. We can use those to send messages. They reached another intersection, and Sarah began opening access panels to expose the Academy's internal communication infrastructure. The systems were designed for automated maintenance reports, but with some creative rewiring. Zix, I need you to act as a signal booster, she said, indicating a series of data cables. Your species can interface directly with electronic systems, right? Yes, but only for simple commands. I cannot access complex networks like the Zephyrians can. I don't need complex. I just need you to amplify a basic signal through these cables. Sarah began connecting her tablet to the maintenance network through improvised interfaces. We're going to send a message the old-fashioned way. What she was attempting was crude by galactic standards, using text-based communication through maintenance channels rather than sophisticated neural broadcasting systems. But crude had advantages. It was simple, required minimal power, and, most importantly, it was so primitive that advanced jamming systems might not even recognize it as communication. "Message ready," Sarah announced. "Broadcasting on all maintenance frequencies." The message was simple: "Students, this is Sarah Chen. Attackers' scans cannot penetrate quantum resonance labs, gravity chambers, or crystalline resonance areas. Use maintenance access codes 4472 alpha through 6651 delta. Avoid main corridors. Human stealth techniques work: stay low, move unpredictably, avoid electromagnetic devices. Will attempt to organize resistance. Trust no one in dark armor." "Will anyone receive it?" Zix asked. "The Zirons will. Their crystalline structure lets them detect electromagnetic fluctuations directly. Some of the tech-savvy students from other species might pick it up through their personal devices." Sarah began disconnecting her tablet. "But, mostly, we're hoping someone gets desperate enough to try anything." As if in response to her words, the maintenance tunnel behind them filled with a soft harmonic tone, the characteristic sound of Ziron communication. The crystalline beings were acknowledging her message and beginning to relay it through their own networks. "It's working," Zix said, his antennae picking up additional signal patterns. "The Zirons are amplifying your message through harmonic resonance. Other students are starting to respond." Sarah felt a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn this desperate situation around. But that hope was quickly tempered by the sound of cutting tools echoing through the tunnel system. The attackers had realized that their prey was using the maintenance network and were beginning to force their way in. "Time to move," Sarah said. "We need to reach those shielded areas ourselves, and we need to do it before they seal off all the escape routes." They began crawling through the tunnels at maximum speed, racing against the sound of systematic destruction behind them. The attackers were being thorough, cutting through barriers and sealing passages to prevent escape. Their mechanical efficiency was terrifying: no wasted motion, no hesitation, just relentless pursuit. Sarah's tablet chimed softly with incoming messages as other students began responding to her broadcast. Most were simple acknowledgments, but a few contained useful information. "Crevier says the gravity training chambers are secure," she read as they crawled. "She's got 15 students with her, including some Taurians who can actually fight if it comes to that." "Torvas reports from the quantum labs," Zix added, reading signals through his natural electromagnetic sense. 23 students there, and the avian flight leader thinks she can use the quantum field generators as weapons if necessary. Good. We're not just hiding anymore, we're gathering forces." Sarah paused at another intersection, checking her improvised map of the academy. "But we need more than just safe hiding spots. We need to understand what these attackers really want and find a way to stop them." The sound of cutting tools was getting closer, echoing through multiple tunnel branches. The attackers had brought significant resources to bear on hunting down scattered students. This wasn't a simple raid or hostage situation, it was systematic extermination carried out with military precision. "Sarah," Zix said urgently, "I'm detecting new signal patterns from the main corridors. The attackers are coordinating something big." Sarah accessed her tablet's sensor functions, trying to interpret the electromagnetic signatures Zix was detecting. What she saw made her blood run cold. "They're not just hunting students anymore," she whispered. "They're setting up some kind of energy accumulator in the central plaza. Look at these power draw patterns." The readings showed massive energy consumption focused on the Academy's main gathering area. Whatever the attackers were building, it required more power than most starships. "A weapon?" Zix asked. "Or a signal beacon?" Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. What if they're not here to just kill us? What if they're using the Academy as bait for something bigger? The implications hit her like a physical blow. The Galactic Academy didn't just house students, it was a symbol of interspecies cooperation and unity. If it was destroyed under mysterious circumstances, or if the students were killed in what appeared to be an accident, it could shatter the delicate alliances that held galactic civilization together. "We have to stop them," Sarah said, her voice hardening with resolve. "Not just survive, actively stop whatever they're planning." "How?" "We're students hiding in maintenance tunnels. They have advanced military technology and professional soldiers." Sarah thought about her grandfather's stories again, about asymmetric warfare and the power of fighting on familiar ground. The attackers might have superior technology, but this was her academy. She had spent months learning every corridor, every system, every quirk of the massive station. "Because they're fighting the wrong war," she said finally. They came prepared for conventional resistance from security forces. They planned for predictable responses from known alien species. They didn't plan for humans. The cutting sounds were very close now. Within minutes, the attackers would break through into this section of the tunnel system. But Sarah was no longer thinking about escape. She was thinking about victory. "Zix, can you interface with the Academy's environmental controls?" "Basic functions only. Temperature, atmospheric composition, gravity in some sections." "That might be enough." Sarah was already pulling up schematics on her tablet. "The attacker's armor is designed for specific environmental parameters. If we start changing those parameters in unpredictable ways." Environmental warfare, Zix realized. Using the Academy itself as a weapon. Exactly. And, once we destabilize their operational parameters, we can start picking them off one by one. The sound of metal tearing echoed through the tunnel as the attackers finally broke through the sealed passage behind them. Sarah could see the glow of their energy weapons reflecting off tunnel walls. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. These creatures had attacked her academy, threatened her classmates, and tried to destroy everything she had worked to become part of. They had made one critical mistake in their planning. They had never fought a war against humans on human terms. "Let's go teach them what guerrilla warfare really means," Sarah said, and began crawling toward the environmental control systems with deadly purpose. Sarah and Zix reached the environmental control hub just as the first energy bolts began searing through the tunnel behind them. The attackers had finally broken through the maintenance barriers, but they were moving cautiously now, aware that their prey had become more dangerous. The environmental hub was a vast chamber filled with atmospheric processors, gravity generators, and climate control systems that maintain living conditions for dozens of different species throughout the academy. Sarah had visited this area once during a technical tour, fascinated by the complexity required to keep beings from different worlds comfortable in the same space. Now she was going to turn that complexity into a weapon. "Connection established," Zix reported, his specialized limbs interfacing directly with the control systems. "I can access basic environmental parameters, but the safety protocols are extensive. The system won't allow changes that could harm students." "Then, we'll have to be creative about what constitutes harm," Sarah said, studying the environmental maps on her tablet. "The attackers are wearing sealed armor, so they're isolated from atmospheric changes. But their equipment still needs to operate in specific parameters." She began pulling up data on the dark armor she had observed during the initial attack. The material seemed to absorb energy rather than reflect it, suggesting some kind of advanced stealth technology. But stealth systems were notoriously sensitive to environmental conditions. "Start with the electromagnetic spectrum," Sarah instructed. "Increase background radiation in the corridors they're using. Not enough to harm students, but enough to interfere with sensitive electronics." Zix's manipulation of the systems was delicate but effective. Throughout the academy, hidden emitters began generating low-level electromagnetic interference. The changes were subtle, barely detectable by organic senses, but Sarah's tablet immediately showed the effects. "Their scanning beams are becoming less precise," she reported, watching the signal patterns. "The interference is degrading their target acquisition systems." Almost immediately, they heard confused voices echoing through the tunnels. The attackers' mechanical coordination was faltering as their advanced systems struggled with the unexpected interference. Phase 2, Sarah said, moving to another control cluster. Temperature variations. Create thermal layers in the corridors, nothing extreme, just enough to disrupt their infrared sensors. The Academy's climate control systems began creating subtle temperature gradients throughout the station. Warm air mixed with cooler currents in seemingly random patterns, creating thermal chaos that would confuse heat-seeking scanners while remaining comfortable for organic beings. Now gravity fluctuations in sections they're not currently occupying, Sarah continued. Make it harder for them to move quickly through areas we control. Sarah, Zix said, his compound eyes reflecting concern, this is dangerous. If we destabilize too many systems simultaneously, we could damage the Academy itself. The Academy is already damaged, Sarah replied grimly. They're planning to destroy it anyway. At least this way, we're fighting back. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message through the maintenance network. It's from Crevier in the gravity training chambers, she read. She says 3 attackers tried to breach their position, but the environmental changes confused their approach. The students were able to seal the entrances before they could get inside. The interference is working, Zix realized. Better than working, it's teaching us something about these attackers. Sarah was studying the patterns of confusion in their movements. Look at how they respond to each environmental change. They're not adapting like living beings would. Their reactions are too mechanical, too predictable. You think they're artificial? Not artificial, enhanced. Look at these movement patterns. Sarah highlighted tracking data on her tablet. Perfect coordination, mechanical precision, identical response times. These aren't natural beings in armor, they're natural beings who have been heavily modified for military operations. The implications were staggering. Cybernetic enhancement was known throughout the galaxy, but this level of coordination suggested something far beyond normal augmentation. It also suggested a weakness. Enhanced beings rely on their technological systems more than natural ones, Sarah explained. If we can disrupt those systems. She was interrupted by an urgent harmonic signal from Zix. Multiple contacts approaching the hub. They've traced our signal to this location. Sarah looked at the environmental controls with regret. They had barely begun to exploit the Academy's defensive potential, but staying to continue the sabotage would mean capture or death. Download everything to my tablet, she instructed. If we can't stay here to control the systems directly, we'll set up automated sequences. Zix's interface with the machinery became more intense, his natural bioelectric capabilities allowing him to access deeper system functions than Sarah's crude manual methods. Programming environmental disruption sequences, he reported. Random temperature shifts, electromagnetic pulses, gravity fluctuations. The system will execute them automatically over the next several hours. Perfect. Now we need to get to the central plaza and find out what they're building there. They abandoned the environmental hub just as cutting tools began working on the sealed entrances. But Sarah noticed something encouraging: the cutting was taking longer than before. The electromagnetic interference was affecting the attackers' equipment, making their tools less efficient. Every small victory added up. The route to the central plaza required moving through some of the Academy's main corridors, a dangerous proposition with armed hunters actively searching for them. But Sarah had a plan for that too. The Academy has emergency evacuation pods scattered throughout the structure, she explained as they crawled through a particularly narrow tunnel. They're designed to be completely self-contained and independent of station systems. If we can reach one, we can use it as a mobile base. Those pods are for faculty use during catastrophic system failures, Zix pointed out. This qualifies. Sarah consulted her tablet's map. There's a pod maintenance bay 2 levels up from our current position. If the environmental interference is working, the attackers might not be monitoring that area closely. They emerged from the tunnel system into a service corridor that felt eerily quiet. The Academy's normal background hum of activity was gone, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by distant sounds of the attackers' systematic search. Sarah led the way toward the emergency pod bay, moving with the stealth techniques her grandfather had taught her during camping trips. Stay low, move irregularly, avoid reflective surfaces, always have an escape route planned. Skills she had never expected to need at an academic institution. The pod bay doors were sealed, but Sarah's stolen maintenance codes still worked. Inside, she found exactly what she had hoped for: a fully equipped emergency pod designed to support a dozen beings for several weeks. Independent power supply, autonomous life support, and, most importantly, communication systems that don't depend on academy infrastructure, she catalogued. This is perfect. Zix was examining the pod's sensor array. We can monitor the entire academy from here without risking detection. The pod's stealth systems are military grade. Sarah activated the communication array and immediately began receiving signals from the scattered student groups. The messages painted a picture of desperate resistance and clever hiding, but also growing desperation. The attackers are getting more aggressive, she read from multiple reports. They're using some kind of sonic disruptors to force students out of hiding spots. Several groups have been captured. What are they doing with captured students? Zix asked. That's what worries me. Sarah pulled up the pod's external sensors and focused them on the central plaza. Let's find out what they're building. The view that appeared on the screen made both of them recoil in shock. The Academy's beautiful central gathering space had been transformed into something that looked like a technological nightmare. Massive energy collectors had been assembled in geometric patterns around a central crystalline structure that pulsed with barely contained power. And, around the perimeter, captured students were being held in some kind of energy containment fields. It's not a weapon, Sarah whispered, horrified recognition dawning. It's a broadcasting array. They're going to use the students as transmission focuses. Zix's exoskeleton shifted to deep crimson. I don't understand. Look at the positioning, Sarah highlighted the arrangement on screen. Each student represents a different species, a different set of quantum signatures. If you wanted to send a signal that would resonate with every major civilization in the galaxy simultaneously, you would need biological templates from each species, Zix finished, understanding flooding his compound eyes. They're going to use our classmates as living transmitters. For what kind of signal? Sarah was analyzing the energy patterns around the crystalline structure. Something big enough to affect entire star systems. Look at these power readings, they're channeling energy from the Academy's main reactor and the neutron star we're orbiting. The full scope of the plan was becoming clear. The attackers weren't just trying to kill the Academy's students, they were planning to use them as components in a galaxy-wide broadcasting system. The signal could be anything from a coordinated attack command to some kind of mind control transmission. We have to stop this, Sarah said, her voice hardening with determination. How? They have most of our classmates as prisoners, and that energy array looks capable of vaporizing anything that gets too close. Sarah studied the tactical situation, applying everything she had learned from her grandfather's stories about impossible military situations. The attackers had superior numbers, better technology, and control of the battlefield. Any direct assault would be suicide. But they also had weaknesses. Their reliance on technology made them vulnerable to system disruption. Their mechanical coordination meant they followed predictable patterns. And, most importantly, they were focused entirely on their primary objective. We're going to give them exactly what they want, Sarah announced. Sarah, no. You can't seriously be thinking of surrendering. Not surrendering, volunteering. Sarah's mind was racing through a complex plan that would require perfect timing and enormous luck. They need a human template for their transmission array. So far, they haven't been able to catch one because their scanners can't track us effectively. That's our advantage. Why would you give it up? Because I'm not going to be a passive template. Sarah began accessing the pod's equipment storage. I'm going to be a virus in their system. She pulled out a collection of standard emergency supplies, but her focus was on the survival equipment designed for hostile environment operations. Among the tools was a personal electromagnetic field generator, normally used to protect individuals from radiation exposure during emergency evacuations. If I can modify this device to generate specific interference patterns, she explained, connecting the field generator to her tablet, I might be able to disrupt their transmission array from the inside. The risk is enormous. If the modification fails, you'll be trapped in their energy containment system with no way to escape. If I don't try, they'll complete whatever signal they're planning to broadcast, and that could be the end of galactic civilization as we know it. Sarah finished her modifications and tested the device. The field generator now produced a subtle but persistent electromagnetic signature that should interfere with quantum resonance systems. If her theory about the transmission array was correct, introducing this disruption at the moment of broadcast should cause a cascade failure. I need you to coordinate with the other student groups, she instructed Zix. When I trigger the disruption, they need to be ready to move immediately. The containment fields will fail, and there will be a brief window to rescue the captured students. And if your plan doesn't work? Sarah checked her equipment one more time, thinking about her grandfather's favorite saying about military operations. Then, we improvise. But we don't give up. She opened the pod's exit hatch and prepared to venture into the corridors where the hunters were still searching. For the first time since the attack began, she was going to let them find her. Zix, remember, humans might not have the most advanced technology or the strongest military traditions, but we have something else. What's that? We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. Sarah stepped into the corridor and began walking toward the central plaza, broadcasting a clear signal that any scanner system would detect immediately. Behind her, Zix began coordinating the most desperate rescue operation in the Academy's history. The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and Sarah Chen was going to prove that sometimes the best strategy was the one nobody expected. Sarah walked through the Academy corridors with deliberate visibility, her electromagnetic signature blazing like a beacon on every scanner system. It didn't take long for the hunters to find her. The dark-armored figures appeared from 3 different directions, their movements perfectly coordinated despite the environmental interference she had programmed into the Academy's systems. Up close, Sarah could see the subtle signs of cybernetic enhancement, 2 fluid motions, synchronized breathing patterns, and the faint electronic glow behind their helmet visors. Human student, one of them spoke, its voice carrying mechanical overtones. You will accompany us without resistance. I wasn't planning to resist, Sarah replied, raising her hands in what appeared to be surrender. The modified electromagnetic field generator was concealed beneath her jacket, its subtle emissions already beginning to interfere with their scanning equipment in ways they wouldn't notice until it was too late. The escort to the central plaza gave Sarah her first close look at the attackers' operation. They moved through the academy with military precision, but she noticed something important: they avoided certain areas entirely. Sections where her environmental sabotage had created the most chaos were simply bypassed, suggesting their enhanced physiology made them less adaptable than normal biological beings. The central plaza had been completely transformed. What had once been a beautiful gathering space filled with art from dozens of worlds was now a nightmarish technological construct. The energy collectors formed a perfect geometric pattern around the central crystalline transmitter, which pulsed with power drawn from the Academy's reactor and the neutron star beyond. But it was the sight of her captured classmates that made Sarah's heart clench with anger. 23 students from different species were held in individual energy containment fields arranged in a complex pattern around the transmitter. Each containment field was precisely calibrated for its occupant's physiology, creating living transmission focuses for whatever signal the attackers planned to broadcast. The final component, another mechanically enhanced voice announced as Sarah was guided toward an empty containment field. Human neural patterns will complete the galactic resonance matrix. What exactly are you planning to transmit? Sarah asked, genuinely curious despite the danger. Compliance protocols for all major species, the lead attacker replied without emotion. Galactic civilization has become too chaotic, too unpredictable. Order must be imposed. Mind control, then. Sarah stepped into the containment field, feeling the energy barriers activate around her. Let me guess, your species developed perfect cybernetic enhancement, decided organic chaos was inefficient, and now you want to turn everyone else into enhanced beings like yourselves. Organic unpredictability leads to conflict and waste. Enhanced coordination produces optimal outcomes for all species. Except you're wrong about one thing, Sarah said, settling into position while secretly activating her hidden field generator. Humans aren't chaotic because we're inefficient. We're chaotic because chaos works. The transmission array began powering up, drawing massive amounts of energy from the neutron star through the Academy's collectors. Sarah could feel the quantum fields building around each containment cell, preparing to use the students' neural patterns as transmission templates. But the modified field generator hidden in her jacket was already working, introducing subtle disruptions into the quantum resonance matrix. The effects were small at first, tiny fluctuations in the energy patterns that the attacker's monitoring systems interpreted as normal variance. Transmission sequence initiated, the mechanical voice announced. Galactic broadcast in 60 seconds. Sarah's tablet, still concealed in her pocket, vibrated with incoming signals from Zix and the other student groups. They were in position and ready to move when the containment fields failed. But first, she had to survive long enough to trigger the cascade failure. You know what the real difference is between enhanced beings and humans? Sarah asked conversationally, watching the energy readings climb toward critical levels. Irrelevant, the lead attacker replied. Enhanced beings follow protocols. Humans break them. The transmission array reached full power, and Sarah triggered the final phase of her field generator. Instead of subtle interference, the device now broadcast a chaotic electromagnetic signature that propagated through the quantum resonance matrix like a virus through a computer network. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The carefully calibrated containment fields began fluctuating wildly as their quantum foundations destabilized. Energy patterns that had been precisely tuned for each species' neural signatures suddenly became chaotic, unpredictable storms of power. System failure detected, multiple mechanical voices announced simultaneously. Containment matrix compromised. The first containment field collapsed entirely, releasing Crevier from her energy prison. The massive Taurian student immediately charged toward the nearest group of attackers, her natural strength enhanced by rage at her captivity. More fields began failing in rapid succession as Sarah's electromagnetic chaos propagated through the entire system. The crystalline transmitter itself began showing signs of overload, its perfect geometric structure crackling with uncontrolled energy discharges. All units converge on human subject, the lead attacker commanded. Terminate interference source. But Sarah had expected that response. As the enhanced beings moved toward her failing containment field, she triggered the Academy's environmental systems for one final surprise. Every atmospheric vent, gravity generator, and electromagnetic emitter in the central plaza activated simultaneously, creating a localized storm of environmental chaos. The attackers' enhanced coordination faltered as their sensors were overwhelmed by conflicting data streams. Sarah's containment field finally collapsed, dropping her onto the plaza floor just as Zix and teams of rescued students burst through the entrances from multiple directions. The environmental interference had given them perfect cover for their approach. The transmitter! Sarah shouted over the chaos. We have to destroy it before they can restart the system. The crystalline structure was still drawing power from the neutron star, its energy levels climbing toward critical mass. If it exploded while connected to the Academy's power grid, the resulting explosion could destroy the entire station. I can disrupt the quantum matrix, called Torvas, one of the Xeron students whose crystalline physiology allowed direct interaction with quantum systems. But someone needs to physically disconnect the power feeds. On it, Crevier replied, her massive form already charging toward the energy collectors. Her Taurian strength was more than sufficient to tear apart the delicate connection systems. The enhanced attackers tried to stop the destruction of their array, but the environmental chaos Sarah had created made coordinated action impossible. Their perfect cybernetic coordination became a liability as conflicting sensor data paralyzed their decision-making processes. Sarah watched Torvas merge with the transmitter's crystal matrix, his Xeron physiology allowing him to introduce harmonic disruptions directly into the quantum structure. At the same time, Crevier systematically destroyed the power connections, cutting the array off from its energy sources. Sarah! Zix called from across the plaza. Emergency evacuation signals from Academy security. Galactic Defense Fleet ships are entering the system. Sarah felt a surge of hope. The attackers' plan had taken too long, given the survivors too much time to organize resistance. Help was finally coming. But the lead attacker wasn't finished. If compliance cannot be imposed, chaos must be eliminated, its mechanical voice announced. Initiating station destruction protocols. Sarah saw the enhanced being activate some kind of device on its armor, probably a high-yield explosive designed to destroy the Academy and eliminate all evidence of the attack. The enhanced beings were prepared to sacrifice themselves rather than allow their failure to be investigated. Everyone get to the evacuation pods. Sarah shouted, but she knew there wasn't enough time. The Academy was too large, and there were too many students still scattered throughout the station. But then, Torvas, still merged with the transmitter's crystal matrix, began generating harmonic frequencies that resonated through the Academy's structure. The sound was beautiful, a complex musical pattern that seemed to calm everyone who heard it. I can use the transmitter's quantum resonance to amplify Xeron harmonic communication throughout the station, he explained, his voice now echoing with crystalline overtones. All students will receive evacuation instructions simultaneously, in their own languages. Brilliant, Sarah breathed. Turn their weapon into our salvation. The harmonic evacuation signal spread through every corridor and chamber of the Academy, reaching students who had been hiding in areas too dangerous for conventional rescue. The Xeron emergency protocols were universally understood by all species, transcending language barriers through pure mathematical harmony. But the enhanced attackers were still preparing to destroy the station. Sarah realized she had one more gambit to play. You made one mistake in your planning, she told the lead attacker as students began evacuating throughout the Academy. State the error. You assumed humans would react predictably to overwhelming force. Sarah smiled grimly. But humans don't surrender when they're outnumbered. We get creative. She triggered the final sequence she had programmed into the Academy's environmental systems. Every atmospheric processor, every gravity generator, every electromagnetic system activated simultaneously, creating a controlled feedback loop that channeled energy directly into the station's defensive shields. The Academy transformed itself into a massive electromagnetic pulse generator, broadcasting a signal that overloaded every enhanced cybernetic system within range. The attackers' perfect coordination shattered as their augmented nervous systems crashed under the electronic assault. Impossible, the lead attacker stammered as its enhanced reflexes failed. Organic beings cannot generate coordinated electronic warfare patterns. You're right, Sarah agreed. Organic beings can't. But organic beings working with artificial systems can do amazing things when they stop following the rules. The electromagnetic pulse had disabled the station destruction device along with the attacker's enhancement systems. Without their cybernetic coordination, the enhanced beings were just confused individuals in damaged armor, easily overwhelmed by groups of angry students. Galactic Defense Fleet vessels now docking with Academy stations, Zix reported, monitoring communication frequencies. Admiral Fexmar is requesting immediate contact with Academy leadership. Tell them to talk to the students, Sarah said wearily. We're the ones who saved the Academy. As rescue teams flooded through the station and medical personnel began treating injured students, Sarah found herself sitting in the central plaza surrounded by the wreckage of the attacker's transmission array. The crystalline transmitter lay in harmless fragments, its quantum matrix permanently disrupted by Torvas's harmonic interference. Sarah, Crevier approached, her massive form somehow managing to look gentle. The defense fleet wants to debrief us about what happened here. The enhanced beings were from the Nexus Collective, Sarah explained. A cybernetic civilization from beyond the galactic rim. They decided organic chaos was inefficient and tried to impose order through technological control. How do you know that? Because their leader told me when they thought they had one. Sarah stood up slowly, every muscle aching from the day's desperate action. They made the same mistake every advanced military force makes when fighting humans. Which is? They planned for us to act rationally. Admiral Fexmar himself arrived to conduct the debriefing, his multiple arms moving in patterns that indicated extreme respect. The tall, crystalline being had commanded Galactic Defense Fleet operations for over 2 centuries, but he had never encountered anything like the Academy siege. "Miss Chen," he said formally, "the preliminary reports suggest that you organized the resistance that saved not just the Academy, but, potentially, galactic civilization itself." "We all organized it," Sarah corrected. Zix provided technical support, Torvas disrupted their quantum systems, Credier handled the heavy lifting. Every student who participated made it possible. But you coordinated the overall strategy. Your species' approach to warfare appears to be unique. Sarah thought about that for a moment. Humans don't have the most advanced technology or the strongest military traditions. But we have something that enhanced beings with perfect coordination lack. What is that? We know how to improvise. When your plans fail, you adapt your tactics. When your tactics fail, you change your strategy. When your strategy fails, you change the rules of engagement entirely. And when changing the rules fails? Sarah smiled, thinking of her grandfather's lessons about persistence and stubbornness in the face of impossible odds. Then, you refuse to admit that failure is possible and keep fighting until you find a way to win. The Academy was saved, the galactic crisis was averted, and Sarah Chen had proved that sometimes the most advanced military technology in the galaxy was no match for human unpredictability and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. But, more importantly, she had proved that diversity, the mixing of different species, different approaches, different ways of thinking, was not a weakness to be eliminated through technological control. It was the greatest strength galactic civilization possessed. The attackers had been wrong about chaos being inefficient. Sometimes, chaos was exactly what the universe needed.